The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Miriam Aliso, and I would like to welcome you to today's webinar, Family Engagement During the Post-Secondary Education Years. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. You will notice on your screen a screenshot of an example of the Gotowebinar interface. You should see something that looks like this on your computer desktop in the upper right corner. You are listening in using your computer's speaker system by default. If you would prefer to join over the phone, just select Telephone in the audio pane, and the dial-in information will be displayed. Be sure to put your unique PIN. To the right of the GoToWebinar PowerPoint viewer is the GoToWebinar control panel. This is where you have the option to select the way you hear the webinar, raise your hand, and ask questions by text. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenter by typing your questions into the Questions for Staff pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect these and address them during the Q&A session in the middle and at the end of today's presentation. You can also download the slides in PDF. They are available to you. So now I pass the mic to Josie.
Okay, thank you, Miriam. Welcome everyone to today's webinar. I am Josie Badger, the co-director of the National RAISE Center. And today I have the privilege of introducing Dr. Jessica Queener, who is with the Institute for Educational Leadership, which has been a partner with us since the very beginning. This topic of family engagement during post-secondary education has been an ongoing topic of interest for our parent centers, our families, and youth. We know that things change dramatically from high school into post-secondary education, and so this is a very important topic for transition. There are going to be additional materials coming out later in the year, and I know Jessica will be mentioning that, but we will be sending that out to everyone once they are released and approved by the government. But I want to turn it over to Jessica for our presentation.
Thank you so much, Josie, and thank you so much, Miriam, and everyone on your team for your support today. I'm so excited to be here during this webinar and on this particular topic. I am very passionate about family engagement, and I'm passionate about transition. And as a person with a disability myself, having gone through this process, and all of us having gone through some type of transition from high school to college, and or work or other types of transitions that we are doing during that time period, it's always a challenge to navigate for all and any of us. So I'm very excited to be here. And full disclosure, I do want to share that I have a cochlear implant in my right ear, and I will do my best to answer questions and respond to questions, but I may ask things to be repeated if necessary. So I just wanted to give everyone a heads up about that. And with that, I also want to say as well that while I have professional expertise in this area, I also have personal experience in this area. So what I tend to do in my presentations is I do kind of a combination, a hybrid. So I share some things that are pertinent to the presentation, but that I can pull pieces in from my personal life that has provided me some additional insight, and in the hopes that it might be relevant to you and you can take it back to to the families and to the youth that you are working with in your community. So with that being said, I do want to say that I've been in the field for 17 years, and I started out as a self-determination coordinator working with teachers in the field, general ed and special ed, on developing self-determination and self-advocacy skills in all of their students, not just students with disabilities. And I did that for a number of years, and then I moved to the DC area for grad school, and I have continued to do this work. And now I've been working in the last few years at the Institute for Educational Leadership. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that. So next slide, please. So I work specifically on a federal grant called the Vocational Rehabilitation Youth Technical Assistance Center, otherwise known as YTAC, because we have to acronym everything in this field. So in YTAC, we are partners with Cornell University, Boston University School of Education, and with several key subject matter experts across the country. And the purpose of this Technical Assistance Center is to build capacity in vocational rehabilitation counselors in the field to better serve young people with disabilities. And I'm going to go into a little bit more about that as we continue on down the slides. But first, I would like to tell you a little bit more about IEL. Next slide, please. So IEL is the Institute for Educational Leadership. This is where I work in Washington, D.C. We are a nonprofit that has been around for 55 years, and we have done a lot of work in doing systems change and also equipping leaders, as well as building capacity in young people and also young people with disabilities, connecting them to community resources, looking into building smoother pathways, career pathways into the workforce, and not only just for the current, for the generation they're in, but for all the future generation, and mentoring the younger generation as well. So we've done a lot of work in these areas, and in addition to YTAC, there are two other areas of work that you might be interested in looking more into. This would take a whole separate webinar into itself, but we do have a whole area focused on family and community engagement. We just recently had a big conference on that. And then we also have a Coalition for Community School, which really focuses on providing wraparound services, not only for the students, but for the family and the communities are part of the school and coming in as well. So it's an interesting model and an interesting networks, and I highly encourage you to go to our website and look at them for more information. Next slide, please. So as I said, YTAC, the work that we do, we provide a lot of training and technical assistance to state VR agencies, particularly, and their partners, particularly to VR counselors. And we do it in these specific areas. So the first area that we focus on, we engage, we're discussing youth with disabilities who are not identified in special education. And we're also looking into engaging with youth who are no longer in school and not employed. And that may mean navigating and understanding the different systems that other youth are in, such as the juvenile justice system, the foster care system, and youth who are experiencing homelessness. So what we do is we really build capacity in vocational rehabilitation agency to better understand those systems that youth with disabilities are in, that they are not, may not be as familiar with or not partners with as smoothly in a collaborative partnership. So that is what we do at YTAC. So let me tell you a little bit about other technical assistance centers. Next slide, please. So there are a few other youth-focused technical assistance centers. One is the National Collaborative on Workforce and Disability for Youth, which you will hear a bit about today, because a lot of our material from YTAC uses the material that NCWD Youth created, and it is the foundation for our work on YTAC. And the National Collaborative of Workforce and Disability for Youth is housed at IEL. There is also the Promise TA Center, which focuses on promoting the readiness of minors and supplemental security income. They have their own website. There's also WINTAC, the Workforce Innovation Technical Assistance Center. They focus primarily on in-school youth and as well as pre-EX with regard to building capacity in VR state agencies. So they work specifically in that area. And then there's also the National Technical Assistance Center on Transition, and they focus on providing technical assistance to state education agencies as well as VR, and providing assistance around the requirements on delivering IDEA services, transition-related services under IDEA. So each of these websites have an enormous amount of resources on them. So I highly encourage you to put these in your toolbox of your resource libraries. Next slide, please. So today we are going to be discussing family engagement during the post-secondary education years. And family engagement is, as I said, it's an important topic, but it's also a topic that is heavily focused in our guideposts for success. So the National Collaborative on Workforce and Disability for Youth created a guidepost for success in 2005. And so we had just recently updated it. And there's 5 areas in the guidepost for success. One of them focuses on school-based preparatory experiences, which includes post-secondary education and family engagement. So we're doing a hybrid of 2 areas of the guidepost today in this webinar. I do want to share with you that the guidepost for success, the updated version, we're calling it right now Guidepost 2.0. It is currently under review at the Office of Disability Employment Policy at the Department of Labor. So as soon as we have clearance through that approval process, we will, as Josie said, share that with everyone today and on the call, and those of you that are not able to join us on the call, it will go out to everyone. So we're very excited about this. But I do want to share with you that we have been working in the area of family engagement for a number of years, and really thinking about the shifting of the role of families and how families are while a young person is in the school environment, and then what does that family engagement look like once a young person is 18 years old and they are considered an adult. So at that point, how do we handle the dynamics, and what is that relationship look like with working with a young person versus a young person who is now an adult. So we had an online dialogue with families back in 2015 that focused on how post-secondary institutions can better assist families in supporting their young adults to succeed in education and employment. And we're working on finalizing a brief for families on the ways to support their students and during the post-secondary education years by assuming a coaching role. And I will go into that more as the presentation goes on. But I just want you to be aware that this brief has that we're in the process of finalizing has been informed by conversations with families of post-secondary education students with disabilities and other experts in the field with regards to disability, family engagement, and post-secondary education. So these are what I'm doing is pulling some of the highlights of this brief that will be released. So today, next slide, please. So today, we are going to focus and we will discuss, one, the changing role of families after high school, strategies for families to transition into a new coaching role after high school, and then we will also share a strategy that post-secondary institutions can use to engage families as partners. Next slide. So the essential question that we are all always asking is, what do youth need? What do youth need from parents, families, and other caring adults to be successful in transitioning from high school to adult life? So I want you to think back in your own mind, what were some of the things that you needed to be successful in your own transition? So as we're going through some of these slides, just take some time to reflect on yourself and where you were at that point in time and what things you needed. Next slide. So all youth need, so what we've done is we have things that all youth need, and then we have things that's specific to youth with disability. But first, all youth need family members and other caring adults who, one, have high expectations that build upon the young person's strengths, interests, and needs that foster each youth's ability to achieve independence and self-sufficiency. So one of the things that was a big part of my own growing up. So my father was a strong influence in my life, and one of the things he would always tell me was, it's better to try and fail than fail to try. And so that was drilled into me as I was growing up. So I had this healthy respect for failure, and I didn't enjoy it. I don't think anyone enjoys failing, but you do learn to embrace the lessons learned from that failure and what to do next time when you're in a similar situation. So learning how to manage that is really important. And also, another thing that all you need is they need families to take an active role in transition planning with schools and community partners. I know that is easier said than done, but as much as possible, encourage families to take an active role so that students and the young adults can one day be leading and facilitating in that space as well. The other important thing, all of these are important, but I'm just pulling out specific one, is having access to medical, professional, and peer support networks as a young person is transitioning. This piece is critical for them to have so that to ensure all the services and their needs are being met. Next slide. So this is, again, as I was saying, we'd have some slides focusing on specifically what youth with disabilities also need. So youth with disabilities also need an understanding of their disability and how it may affect his or her education, employment, and daily living options. Also, number 2 is knowledge of rights and responsibilities under various disability-related legislation. I cannot understate how important or overstate how important this one is. Having an understanding of how the law changes from when you are a student in the secondary setting to when you're a student in the post-secondary or an employee, and understanding your rights and then the responsibility and understanding the disability-related legislation with regards to civil rights. It is so important in advocacy to know what you are leaning on, what is backing you up. So important to know. And also, it's important for youth with disabilities to have knowledge and access to programs, services, and supports and accommodations available for young people with disabilities. And one thing that I have seen in my work and in talking with people is that so often you don't know what you don't know. So it's important that the expert that the young person is talking to is relaying all of the information to that young person, because they may not be aware of the level of services they can be asking or requesting. So it's important for the young person to have that knowledge. At the same time, it is also important for the young person with a disability to come in being ready and confident and comfortable with asking questions. So not always knowing what's available to you is one thing, but being able to come in and ask those questions is critical, so that you are getting and obtaining information. Next slide, please. So what does the research say? Well, the research says that family involvement is an essential element of transition planning, as families are continuous advocates and supporters for their students, and their partnership has an effect on graduation rates, employment, and achievement of other post-school outcomes. We know that this is critical during the post-secondary education years, and as well as before and after. Also, research consistently shows that parents play a critical role in the development of self-determination skills, critical to success in post-secondary education and other aspects of adult life, such as goal setting, decision making, problem solving, and self-advocacy. And I am sure that you all have witnessed in watching people who are really good at goal setting, decision making, and problem solving, and having those self-advocacy skills. Those have become models for you, and you have incorporated those pieces into your own life. So being able to watch and learn from other people is critical, and families play a huge role in that process. Next slide, please. So the other piece that the research says is that research emphasizes the importance of parental role during the secondary and transition. It also points out the gradual shift of those roles from parent as an advocate to parent as a coach or a support role for their person during transition. So it's moving from that advocacy role to that coaching role. Next slide, please. So this slide kind of gives you a sense of where and how families are in the beginning, how the young person as a dependent, how they are as caregivers, and some of the things that that are happening within those roles. Next slide, please. So how can we help parents make that transition from being a caregiver to an advocate to an advisor role? That's really the role that we are encouraging families, and that's what research is encouraging families in that coaching role, is to think about how do we not only do these pieces in the beginning, but then families are slowly moving back and taking a back seat and having the young person themselves being in the driver's seat. And that's really having families think about and coaching young people with supported decision making, for example. Another one is natural consequences. Taking a step back also means, the young person may not make a decision that you would think someone might think they should make, but they do it, and then they have natural consequences of that decision. And it's simply providing advice and recommendation, but not necessarily telling the young person what to do and how to do it, and these are all the steps. So giving that young person some ownership of what they are doing in terms of talking to people and making decisions and setting goals. Next slide, please. So from there, what I'm going to do is take you through each stage, and that we have is each stage of the post-secondary education process, and key things to think about. So this one is called Milestone, is setting career and post-secondary goals that match your student interest and strength. So what are specific steps that families can take to reach this milestone? And again, I want you to reflect back into your own situation. What was it like when you were transitioning into adulthood and you were coming across these same types of milestones, scenarios? Next slide, please. So a key thing that has to happen during this time period is students need to engage in self-exploration to identify their interests, skills, and values. These are happening in the school. Sometimes they're happening outside of school. And sometimes conversations are not taking place as they should be with regards to these things. So one of the things that, as an advisor, families can think about is how do we negotiate, or how do we have these conversations with young people about their career assessment results to determine whether or not these are identified strengths and interests are still accurate based on what they say that they want to do. So for example, I remember in middle school, I did a career assessment. However, and this was again a while ago, but I remember I did a career assessment and then it went into a file and then I didn't see it again. And I didn't take a copy of it home, didn't really have any discussion. It was kind of a one-off. So there was nothing that really came out of that. So how do we have like these conversations of what's happening in the classrooms and in the schools, and then having it also in the families and sharing that information back and forth, because these kinds of things could be happening at home as well. How do we take that information and share it in the school? So to really have an accurate picture, a more accurate picture of the young person's strength and interest and what they're wanting to do beyond high school and during the post-secondary education years. One of the other things is, as an advisor, you want to encourage them to take advantage of personal and career interest activities while they're in school to help them understand the value of being involved in extracurricular activities and special interest clubs. One of the key things that I remember growing up with talking to my dad about my career, my big version was that I was, in my big picture, was that I was going to become president of the United States. That was my career goal. That's what I wanted to do. And the first thing that he asked me was, he said, well, that's a great goal, but what's the first step you're going to take to get there? And no one had ever really asked me that question before. He didn't ask me if it was a realistic goal. He didn't ask me if my grades were strong enough for that. He didn't ask me, all of those types of questions. He just asked me, what was the first step you are going to take to get there? And I had to think about that. No one ever really thought about it, had presented it that way to me before. So when I had my answer, I responded and said, the first step I'm going to take is to pass 6th grade. And I knew that I had to pass 6th grade in order to get to this goal, this ambitious goal that I had for myself. And it was at that moment, it was kind of a catalyst moment for me in that sense. It's not going to happen for every student. Every student is going to be so different. But for that moment, that's what solidified why subjects in school were important, why I had to take math, why I had to take science, things that I necessarily didn't like. While I enjoyed history, I enjoyed politics, I enjoyed English, I enjoyed those subjects and did really well, but didn't put as much effort and focus on the subjects I didn't do well. But if I was going to reach my goal, I recognized in that moment that I had to do the things I didn't like to do in order to get to the place I really wanted to be, along with doing the things that I was naturally good at. So, and one of the things that my father always encouraged me to do was like, if you're interested in doing this, you should think about student council, think about being involved in a political campaign. You should think about this and this and that. And to make a long story short, all of those things fueled my interest and gave me ideas. And so I went and did those things. And so later on, when I was in high school, I ended up being in the PAGE program and getting paid to work in the House of Representatives in Washington, D.C. at 16 years old, because I simply just called my congressman and asked him for an internship that led me to this year-long internship, basically, that was paid. I had a place to live, and led me to this opportunity and exposure to politics at a national level. So had I not had that level of encouragement, it may have been a very different story, and it may have led to, it wouldn't have led to the opportunities that I've had. So just wanted to share that with you. So let's move to the next milestone. So next step in something to consider is students need to explore career options to inform decisions about college and career goals. So the key thing here is thinking about, it's understanding and communicating to students and young people is the importance of the idea of having career options and being exposed to them. So you're only exposed to what you're only exposed to. So sometimes you may think you have a strength in this area because you're exposed to it, but if you go and try something new and different that you've never done before, you might have a strength in that area. So being open to new possibilities and being open to new options and exploring different careers can help make a more informed and strategic plan for a future career goal. So one thing that I have seen in working with young people is that oftentimes people get focused on one goal, and this is their one goal. For example, someone might really want to go into the medical profession and be a doctor, or someone might really want to go into athletics and be a professional golfer or a football in sport, or someone might want to go into the legal profession. So like there's all of these things that they're thinking about, but oftentimes they don't think that they have multiple options, that there are multiple pathways, and that there are opportunities to talk to people within those different areas and have exposure to those different career paths. So helping young people explore a wide range, encouraging families to look at their own networks within their community, whether it's in their church, whether it's in their gym, or whether it's in their backyard, whoever that they are associating with, tapping into those different careers of the different people that they know, or people that they that their neighbor may know, that they may not necessarily have a direct link to that person, but that can introduce them. So just really just building those networks and thinking about how the young person can navigate and manipulate those networks would be really helpful in thinking about exploring those different career options. Next slide, please. So students need to determine what they want out of the post-secondary experience and what post-secondary institutions align most closely with their goals and needs. And one of the things here it talks about advisors think about a reflection process that prompts young people to visualize and describe what success looks like at the end of post-secondary education. And I think this is a really good activity to do. What does success look like at the very, very end of once you have reached this goal of obtaining your degree? I think this is very, very helpful to a young person in getting them to think beyond obtaining the degree. Sometimes the goal stops there, and it's about obtaining the degree, but not necessarily about, well, what are you going to do once you have that degree, and start thinking about how they're going to utilize that degree to either pursue additional education or work opportunities, and then maybe go back to school at some point. So one of the things that to consider is really just having some time designated for families to think about this time for reflection. And that is so hard to do, I think, when we're all on the go, and we're not always taking a few minutes to step back and to really reflect on what are we doing, and why are we doing it, and how are we going to do it, and then what is it going to look like once we're at that place, and then what are we going to do next. Next slide, please. So one of the things that I had mentioned earlier is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act and transition planning, because there's requirements within that. And one of the things that happens is that there's always IEP meetings, individual education plan, transition planning meeting, and there's also the student summary of performance with their IEP that they would be leaving with upon a completion of high school. So as much as possible, encourage families to think about how they're going to start bringing, along with the educators in the schools, how they're going to start bringing in, and how young are they going to start bringing in the students in this process. If they're in the process of wanting to do a student-led IEP by the time that they are in middle school or in high school, what does that look like? And because of what often happens in this process is that students are learning about decision making while they're in these meetings. They're also learning about goal setting, because you have annual goals, but you also have short-term goals. They're also being watched. They're also watching their mentors and their families and how they interact, how they collaborate, how decisions are made. This is a great way to target some of those skills and for students to learn how to facilitate that, so that when they leave to go to college or they leave to go into a work environment, they understand about collaborating and talking, and the give and take of going back and forth with someone if there is a respectful disagreement, or if there is a discussion, and how to navigate hard conversations. And so anyway, this is the one I would strongly encourage for families to really think about, and bringing in young people into their transition planning meetings as much as possible. Next slide, please. So these are, for this particular section that I shared with you, these are some key resources that I wanted to share with you with regards to the different resources. And these are all free resources, and many of them are on the National Collaborative on Workforce and Disability website. So on your own time, I highly suggest you take a look at them, and also add them to your own resource library to give to families and to young people as appropriate, and that it'd be helpful, and hopefully be helpful to you in having those conversations with them as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so I wanted to take a minute here, because I am at a good pause place, and ask if there was any questions so far.
Okay, hi Jessica, it's Jessica, and I will show you, we actually had 2 audience members share some links, which I included in the chat box and sent to the whole audience, and if you don't get those, feel free to contact us and we will send you those links again. But Monica Toma asks a really great question that I'm gonna have to think about. I'd love to hear your answer. She asks, are there any resources to support parents to help youth understand and come to terms with their diagnosis or special needs when the youth does not feel they have a disability?
That's an excellent question. I'm writing this question down.
I can repeat it if you like. Are there any resources to support parents to help youth understand and come to terms with their diagnosis or special needs when the youth does not feel they have a disability?
I think that's an excellent question, and I can't think of any, I cannot think of any resource off the top of my head that directly relates to this particular situation. I can tell you what I have done in my own work is that I have worked with youth who have not felt that they have a disability. I worked in a school here in Washington, D.C., and it was called the Kingsbury Center, and it was a school for students with learning disabilities. And many of our high school students came from the District of Columbia. They were public school students coming to the District of Columbia because the level of services that were required, the district could not provide, and Kingsbury did. And so they referred and had them come to Kingsbury. And anyway, one of the things that came up as I was working with the high school youth, and I worked very closely with the guidance counselor and at that time, and one of the things that we had talked about was how in general, and this wasn't for everyone, but how in general, because students were in a school for students with learning disability, the accommodations were naturally embedded into the programming, into the school day, to the point where they had a hard time making a distinction of what was an accommodation and then what was just a simply just part of the service of the school day. So they had a really hard time making that distinction, and then thereby having a hard time understanding what accommodations actually mean, and of course understanding their diagnosis. So what we did was we had invited former students to come back and talk to the students about accommodation, about their diagnosis, about their disability. And one of the students I remember who came back had gone to Florida and had come back, and he had failed his first term, and he was sharing because he did not believe he really had a disability, and that he therefore did not register with disability services, and so on and so forth. And he was sharing his story, and he was also sharing his lessons learned, but then he was also sharing with them the importance of disclosure and understanding your disability. And that in itself went a long way into changing the thinking of the students that we were working with. And from there, we did the 411 on disability disclosure, which is a NCWD youth publication and resource. And we did that workbook with them, along with them looking at their own files, IEP files. And of course, we brought in the families into that process. We had a parent meeting, which all the parents showed up before we started all of this, and gained permission from the parent, talking about why we wanted to talk about it. And one parent made the comment at the meeting saying, I am so glad this is happening. My son or daughter has been going here since kindergarten, and this has never really been addressed, and we really need it to be addressed. And so, I mean, there was a well of support from the family. So in home, when they were going home, they had support. We were giving them support at the school. So when we got into the work of the 411 disability disclosure, we were also sharing that information with the family. So I don't know if that really answers your question directly, but it was just a case in which I had come across that, and that's kind of how we had handled it at the school level.
Thank you. And I think that's all the questions right now. I am sharing in the chat all the suggestions that people put in the question box. So those will keep coming as Jessica continues with the presentation.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Okay, so the next milestone is understanding how do young people do their best and how to obtain the support needed. So one of the things that to think about is the importance of students' perceptions of their strengths and weaknesses and how to provide input, because the student and the young and their perception and the perception of the adult allies that they're working with may see their strengths and may see their weaknesses very differently. So it's important to have open conversation, and not only to have them here with one person and the family member, but also talking to other people in their networks, because as we all do in all of our networks, each side of our strengths are shown differently based on the context in which we are in. So it's important to talk to several people that are key into building the young person's skill set. Next slide, please. I am hearing some typing in the background.
I'm sorry, I forgot to mute myself.
Oh, that's okay. So the next piece is the students need to learn about their disabilities and what services and accommodations they may need. And we were just discussing this. And it's one of the things is to keep talking about it, encouraging families to start early. I knew from the time I was 5 that I had a hearing loss and that I needed to be able to sit up in the very front row in the classroom. So from the time my parents sat me down when I was 5 years old, every single day on the first day of school, I went in and I talked to my teacher about needing to sit in the front row. As I got older, I acquired a mental health diagnosis, which was anxiety and agoraphobia. And so in the context in which I would face anxiety triggers, and one of them was talking about blood and health related issues. So I would go to my health teacher and I would share that I get anxious, and at times I need to be able to leave the classroom to get a drink of water, to take a break, however. And so had very direct conversations very early on with adults about what I need and what would help me be successful in that environment. And then understanding as when you move from high school into college, how do those accommodations, what are those accommodations, what are they? What are you currently receiving? And then what do you need to be successful in the post-secondary environment? Because in college, accommodations are not going to be the same always be the same as the ones that a young person has received in the secondary environment. Next slide, please. Students need to know why, when, what, whom, and how to disclose a disability in post-secondary setting. Advisors need to think about how to access to a disclosure guide and resources. And I mentioned the 411 on disability disclosure. It is a great tool. It is a starting point in which to have those conversations. There's also a workbook for families on the 411 on disability disclosure as well, and I do provide a link in the resources on that. And again, just the nice thing about this tool is that it does reiterate and relay information about their rights and their responsibilities. So it's all in one place for families to look at, to review for themselves, but also to have the conversation with the young person. Next slide, please. So as students are planning to move into the post-secondary education environment, they need to think about registering with the Office of Disability Services. One key thing that is important is that families and young people with disabilities need to think about is the level of services provided at the Office of Disability Services. There are tiers of levels of disability services in terms of the level of services that they provide. So they could be going to a level 1 service school, which basically means that it meets compliance. It goes as high as a level 3 in terms of services, which means it means that they don't just, it's beyond compliance, and it's about best practices, and sometimes it's an associated fee with those types of services. So it's important to understand the different levels, the families to understand the different levels, and to visit the college campuses as much as possible, talk to people on the phone. The young person need to do this as much as they can, should be lead in doing this, and setting time and planning all of the logistics, making sure that they don't register for disability services the day that they arrive on campus on their first day. They should be doing this months in advance, as soon as they know that they are going to that university or college. Next slide, please. These are the resources that I mentioned to you. You have these in your copy, and it takes you directly to the links at the 411. But another key resource is state vocational rehabilitation agencies. There are instances in which, based on the student's disability and based on their eligibility, could receive services from VR that can assist them while they're in the post-secondary education environment. And that will look different from student to student and from state to state. But it is a great resource to share with families so that they are aware that this resource does exist for young people with disabilities. Next slide, please. So it's important to think about ways in which how you can help the young person and advise the young person in getting to know the school that they are planning to attend. Next slide, please. So there are some steps for reaching this particular milestone. One is students need to get familiar with the campus. Having them research pre-college summer programs, offer to take them on a campus visit, as I was sharing, discussing the institution's policies and procedures. This one is important. Having a clear understanding of the chain of command. I weren't disclosed to a professor on the first day of school, as I always have for so many years in K through 12. And most of the professors, pretty much all of the professors, with the exception of this one, was wonderful. They said, sure, I had my letter from the Office of Disability Services and everything was great. But I went into this one particular professor, and he said that he would refuse to wear the microphone, and the microphone that he was wearing was to help block out background noise, and I would only hear his voice in the classroom. And he said the reason for it was because it was not aesthetically pleasing for the other students to look at. So I had to learn in that moment how to negotiate and how to have a conversation with someone who was obviously very experienced, very forthright, very set in his ways of thinking. And so my response, and from having talked about this in preparation for it, was that I'm very sorry that you feel and you think this way. I do I do need this class to be successful, and then I will have to go back to disability services to talk to them about this, and then I will also more than likely have to go and talk to the dean of your school about this as well. And at that moment, he was like, "Oh, okay. I will wear the microphone. I will just wear it." So, but that isn't always the case. Sometimes you have to go through a more rigorous process for things to happen. But it's important to know the policies and procedures of that particular school, and that so you know how to troubleshoot when a problem arises at the current moment. Next slide, please. So one of the things that is important is to think about students is transportation. Transportation is often a barrier for many young people, also, and sometimes for families as well. So having a plan to think about that, and also a plan how to manage personal assistance services. What does that look like? What does that require? Who are the people that they need to talk to ensure that their daily activities and that they are able to go out and be in the community fully included. Next slide, please. So it's important to think about how students need to connect with other students, including those with disabilities. Students need to meet with their professors, as we discussed this already. Having that connection of talking to other students with disabilities provides valuable feedback to young people who are coming into this environment. There's a lot to think about, and there's a lot to plan for, and talking to people who have been there and understand it, and finding new people in the current environment who are currently students and who have been previous students is very helpful, and thinking about a place to go for school. So I recognize the next slide, please. These are the resources for this particular section, and I just want to say I recognize that we're coming up on time, so I just want to kind of take you through the rest of the presentation in terms of like the key areas to think about in terms of the different milestones. So next slide focuses on making key life decisions, and thinking about how students need to financially pay for school, how to build relationships with new people that are going to be of support in their health, and with regards to healthcare, with regards to prescription, also with regard to housing. All of those things are really important. Another key piece to this presentation focuses on getting acclimated to post-secondary education, managing the day-to-day life in a bit more detail, and thinking about all of the different levels of services and the scheduling that needs to go into place, and the local networks of support, but not just on campus, but also off campus as well. So once they have completed college, it's important for them to think about preparing for employment. And what does that look like? What career opportunities they need to take advantage of while they're in the post-secondary education setting? And then how do they maximize that once they're in the employment setting? So there are some specific steps related to that, and ways in which families can be engaged in supporting students in that role. And then the last piece, the last section is while you're working with families, if there are post-secondary institutions that you are working closely with in regards to your work, there's also a section on how to talk to post-secondary education institution about how to be stronger partners with family, because many schools do not do not put a lot of emphasis around family engagement as much as they could. They often have alumni gathering. They provide a different context. They have sporting events. There's a lot of ways in which families do come to campus and are there. But how can universities build stronger relationships with families to encourage family engagement to the success of the person graduating from the school? So I have some additional information and resources with regard to that. And then at the very end, I have some resource references and some additional resources. So the very last slide that I have has the two websites. So it has, which a lot of resources come from, is the National Collaborative on Workforce and Disability for Youth, and then the YTAC website, and then as well as my contact information on the very last slide. So there's my contact information. If you have any questions about any part of the pieces and the sections of the presentation, I'd be happy to go more in depth with you and have a phone call. And if not, I'd be happy to do it over email. Feel free to email me anytime. And again, I thank you all so much for your time and for your participation and for your questions and for sharing your resources. I hope that this is helpful to you and to the people that you are working with. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jessica, so much for this great presentation. Everyone, thank you for joining us. Again, this is from the Rees Center, supported by the IEL Center. So thank you all for joining us. We will be hosting another webinar in the next few months. We'll probably have one in August and one in September. Please be on the lookout for announcements of those coming out soon. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you for joining us.